Welcome to the Lean Solutions Podcast. This is the podcast that adds value to leaders by helping you improve performance using process improvement solutions with bottom line results. My name is Patrick Adams, and this season I'll be joined by three other amazing hosts, including Catherine McDonald from Ireland, Andy Olrich from Australia, and Shane Doffenbaugh from the United States. Join us as we bring you guests and experiences of lean practitioners from all over the world.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Lean Solutions Podcast. My name is Andy Olrich, and I'll be one of the four hosts of the Lean Solutions Podcast for Season 3. I'll be joining, of course, Patrick Adams, but also we'll be having Shane and Catherine and myself share the hosting around. Really looking forward to sharing some of the insights and learnings as we have done for Seasons 1 and 2. And I can't wait for you to see the fantastic guests we've got coming along for you again, to share their experience, their insight, their passion and learnings to help us all as a community go on and continue to deliver the benefits to ourselves and our organizations through lean and continuous improvement. So, yeah, you may have picked up, I don't sound like I've been raised in the United States. As I said, Patrick is looking to mix things up a little bit. I'm located in Australia, so I'm about 100 miles north of Sydney, for those of you who know where that is. So I've lived in this area my whole life, and I'm really interested and excited to see, what are the unique differences with what the experiences are for this part of the world and some of my learnings and insights compared to wherever you're listening to around the world. So Patrick has really put a great effort in to help set us up so we can talk and have a truly global experience around how we talk about lean and how we learn and share the things that we're doing, what goes well, and what are we going to try and do a little bit differently next time. So a culture of continuous improvement is all about learning and sharing. So thanks very much for having me along, Patrick. And for those of you out there listening, this is my first go at being a podcast host. So I'd really appreciate your feedback and support as we move forward, because I am passionate about this, and if I can add value in someone's day through this as well, I'd really like to continue to do so. So a little bit about me. What have I done in the past, and why am I here now talking to you and so passionate about lean and continuous improvement? Well, for me, I've been in trade roles. I left school and did an apprenticeship as an electrician. I've since gone through and I've worked in various industries in trade-based roles, and then I've gone into some leadership type roles, middle management, and then had the fortunate experience of getting some great coaching and support to go through and do some formal lean and Lean Six Sigma training. So currently now I'm leading a program at a water utility here in Australia, where my key responsibility is to deploy and embed a great culture of continuous improvement and innovation. And the focus is around people and culture, and it's around empowering others, giving them the tools, skills, and support so they can go on and do the continuous improvement themselves and then spread that through their teams themselves. So I've worked in various industries. I've worked in manufacturing, mining, bulk handling, logistics, health, government, service type roles, operations. So pretty broad range of industries. And it's really exciting for me as I continue on my career path that I can see where lean and continuous improvement tools and methodologies are applicable in any type of industry. Everything has a process. And I always get a lot of joy out of testing the boundaries a little bit there to see, well, okay, you do get challenged around, does this stuff work outside of manufacturing? Let's do it together and we'll see what we can do. So that's a bit about me. And Patrick's asked us each to come along today out of, the last 10 years where I've been working in a formal process improvement or continuous improvement role. What's a specific tool or approach that I've used that I think has added some real value? I've got some really great learnings out of, and I think may be worth sharing with you all here on the podcast today. So when it comes to lean and continuous improvement, my approach is not getting clever with the tools. There's enough tools and iterations of lean and Lean Six Sigma tools that have been around for a while, or people are tweaking in their own way to suit what type of role they're in. I always try and stick to the core basics around, well, why is the tool here and what is the desired outcome of this tool? And those real foundational pieces, that's where we need to start and be strong in before we go on and, as I said, try and get clever with using multiple tools for different things. I believe that the tools, whilst they have a basic structure and framework to them, they need to be enhanced or conditioned, as you like, whatever the right words are, to suit the type of operations you're in, align with the purpose of what the work is that you're doing, and of course with the customer in the front of mind. So I don't have a hard line around this tool must be this particular format and you must use it like this all the time. It's really about, look, the tool, its purpose is this. Here's some examples of how we could use it. Really, it's the upstream and downstream things that I really look to understand and have in mind when we look to bring a new tool in or potentially change an approach of how we use a particular tool. So there's a lot of people out there who've been doing this a lot longer than me. I'll put my hand up right away and say I'm definitely no expert. And a core outcome of me being on this podcast and why I listen to it is to learn from you and others that we'll have on as guests. So in all of that, the tool that I've chosen to talk about today and some of my experiences is leader standard work. For those of you who are familiar with leader standard work, you'll know it's one of the foundational tools and processes that we strive to embed in organizations to help people make sure that they're working on the right things at the right time. And for me, it's just a fantastic tool to make sure that I'm engaging well with the people who are doing the work and also making sure that I am out there myself, present, visible, but also not overdoing it and getting in the way. So really, I know there's a lot of different iterations of the tool, especially now that we're digitizing a lot of things, whether it be through having to do so through the COVID pandemics and people not being able to be at work in person as much as they were previously. Digital transformation, of course, there's that many different systems and processes and tools that you can utilize a leader standard work type approach with. So I'll just talk about what I use and what I like to use and again, at the core of it all, what is the purpose of this tool and what is the process and method all about? So I first got introduced to leader standard work when I was in a role in a lean manufacturing business, a steel manufacturer, and it was how they worked. It was embedded well. It had been embedded for a few years, and for me, I was quite taken aback actually when I first saw everybody had a little piece of paper up on the wall there with the little dots and all these different tasks and things, and straight away, like I find now, as people say to me, well, I've got a calendar, I don't need this is another thing to do, another thing to fill out. So I was in that space myself. Fortunately, I had some leaders that provided also some training around those foundational lean tools and methodologies, and they were able to give me some context. But there was also a bit of stick there as well. It was, well, this is how we do it around here, and that's part of the role, and you need to jump in and embrace the tool, and we'll help you along the way as you get your head around it, and we really get you to go forth and then shape it for how you need to be successful and effective as a leader in this organization. So that was an experience. The good thing was that I was fortunate that everybody else was doing it, whereas you roll forward a few years coming into organizations where they've never seen it before, or they're certainly not using it up, down, or sideways within the organization, that has some significant challenges in itself. However, where I was, the process was we all had our leader standard work. We could all see them. We would then, at the end of each week, we would then collate those into a central area where the leaders would then review what was there. Of course, looking in at the variances, what didn't go to plan and why. So that's what I love about the leader standard work tool, and where I really try and get people to see that difference with just having a calendar is around, well, here's what we plan to do. If things go over or they don't happen, usually your calendar won't catch that. This is a fantastic way for you to show leaders, but also yourself, am I winning and losing with what I plan to do? And am I seeing myself successful in making sure that I'm having those key interactions and activities with my teams and other leaders in the organization to make sure we're all on the same page. So this was something that once I got the hang of it, I was very much a fan of. And there came a time I had a direct manager that was about 3,000 to 4,000 miles away on the other side of Australia. And there wasn't a lot of regular contact with that manager, okay? So I found this really helpful in me being able to have it visible of what I'm planning to do, those key critical tasks and activities that I must do to not only support my team for what I was there to do in the organisation, but also it really helped me prioritise if there was a bit of a clash or we had a significant disruption to the operation, that I could put those in front of the other leaders and say, hey, which one needs to go? Or look, this didn't get done and here's the reason why, not just I've got a full calendar and everyone's busy. So I found that quite effective. However, this particular leader, I'm convinced that they were just doing leader standard work out of compliance. They weren't really embracing it. And to be honest, I didn't actually see theirs. So it was one of those things where the organisation called out that we would use it, wasn't reflected in some of the behaviours of my direct manager. So one of the things that rolled through and what I wanted to focus on with leader standard work and why it's worth the effort you having one of these and sticking to it is I got into a position where this leader had a bit of a history around moving people on quite quickly. I wasn't aware at the time when I took the role that there'd been a few before me and in some other similar roles across some of the other sites that they had across Australia. And I was, as they say, I was starting to be inserted into the torpedo chute. I could really feel that it's kind of whatever the expectation was, it wasn't clear to me outside of what I'd been capturing in my leader standard work. It was, things were going south there. He was really starting to look in, a performance manager, and in the end, the goal was to move me out of the organisation. It was quite frustrating for me because all of the feedback with the site that I was working on, the site superintendents, we had some national type roles there that were all very happy with the quality of my work. They were great to work with. We had really good relationships, yet I was getting these grenades thrown in from the other side of Australia every now and then. So all in all, when it came to the crunch and I was put to task with this particular manager and the human resources people, there was some things flying around, well, you're not performing, you're not delivering, I don't see that you're doing what I need you to do. It's very easy for me to not only have the context from the feedback of the other leaders that I was working directly with, and they could see me in the day-to-day type activities and how I was behaving and interacting, but I had receipts. I had leader standard work where I had captured all of the activities that I'd done, the approvals, the things that I wasn't getting done. So I was able to have that as evidence. It was this particular instance, if it was called out around a particular project or an issue that didn't happen on time or variances to budget, things like that. Throughout all of the other KPIs and visual management that we used in the place, this is really my line of sight for what I was doing to contribute to those, and also where I was getting pulled away with the broader interests of the business at heart. So that quickly diffused the situation. I was getting to a point where I felt there'd been others in the chair that I was sitting in before that didn't have this to the level of what I had. They really, it was just he said type of an affair. So I, through leader standard work, not only did it help me when I was in that tough time leading up to that conversation with the human resources department, it kept me, I'd say to people, it kept me alive. It actually was, I know it was validated with all the other site leaders. It was being provided to this manager for him to review and challenge by exception. So it was all there to be seen, totally transparent. What I love about Lean and those particular tools and methodologies is it's very visual. I'm a visual guy, and it's fantastic for me to be able to just see at a glance, the 3-second rule where if you can see within 3 seconds whether you're winning or losing, you know that you've got your visual management in a good place. So in the finish, it was made very clear, very visible that I was following what the company wanted me to do. I was using the tools, the approach, and I had all of the variances and the reasons why, most importantly, as to why some of those things slipped or were reprioritized for other things. One of the things I'll sort of wrap up on is, for me personally, I've utilized the outside of work as well, because I see the value in it, and just having that quick glance to go, okay, today, look, let's just focus on today. Everything's crazy at the moment. What do I need to do, and what does my team need me to do at a minimum, and that's where that's helped me do that. And I can say that way back when I was basically forced to start using this tool when I was new to the organization, sometimes that's the approach that's got to be there, because unfortunately, if you don't walk through that door yourself, you don't get it. The way that when I was up against the wall, being pushed and really pushed out of an organization that I really enjoyed working in, and all the other people around me were very happy, that kept me in the game. And I stayed in the game, and it inspired me even more to go on and do more learning and move more formally into roles where I am leading continuous improvement initiatives and training and facilitation of workshops, and now strategically deploying a continuous improvement innovation program in a large water utility, which again, you talk to some people who haven't really been around Lean and Lean Six Sigma, there's a lot of people, well, that probably won't work here because we're not making things. Well, let's have that secondary discussion around, well, it's a process, and those other organizations have finance teams. You talk about the Toyotas of the world, that's one that everybody calls out usually, is, they had people and culture teams, they have finance, they have maintenance teams, logistics, supply chain type things. Okay, just move a step back from the assembly line. Of course, that's the reason why these companies who embrace Lean are so successful, don't get me wrong. But it's all those upstream and downstream processes where the connectivity and the visual side of Lean, and most importantly, the person at the front of all of it and in line with the customer, that's the magic of Lean. For me, is we give you, basically, I use the analogy, I don't like the game at all, don't get me wrong. I like golf. I know a lot of people like golf. I'm very bad at it, so therefore I don't like it much. But I say to people, think of it like your golf bag, okay? You've got various different clubs in there. Let's think about the Lean tools there. We don't want to have 100 clubs in the bag, but you want to have those key tools and clubs that for you to get around that 18 holes or whatever, different things are going to pop up. You need a different club for each of those scenarios. Think of that with the Lean tools. So hence why we don't try and make them too sexy or clever. We understand what that particular tool is there to do, all right? The tool serves the purpose, not the other way around. And leader standard work, absolutely, in an organization where you want to have collaboration, visibility, and be able to have those great relationships with your teams or other teams that you either support or lead, it's got to be there. There's three things that are key to having a successful Lean deployment and sustainment: is visual management, leader standard work, and go to Gemba. And that's just, no one's found an easy way to change my mind on that, because I've lived in it. And as I said, I have a particular template and format that I use that has been shaped depending on what type of organization I'm in and how it needs to connect and interact with other tools. So it's not just something completely standalone and weird. I'm happy to share those with people if they'd like to reach out and see what I use, but more importantly, how I use it. And then they could show me potentially what they use, because I'm always keen to learn. And there's some great ways that people are following leader standard work, but they're doing it in different ways, but sticking to what it's all about. So I hope you've enjoyed this discussion. Again, it's just some personal reflections from me. I have had some people ask me, and I've discussed about how I've used it outside of work. So a prime example is in the COVID-19 lockdown. Actually had one set up in the home that we were using because we're having to share the education side of things for our kids, because they weren't able to go to the schools. So not only did we have to share the workload of our jobs, our day jobs, but also we had to jump in at certain times and make sure the kids were still getting their education and doing the key pieces of work that they needed to do so they could continue their education, because we just didn't know how long this thing was going to go on for. So a combined family leader standard work is a real thing. I've used it. Again, for the time and the situation, I reached into that golf bag and thought, well, this is the outcome I want, is that we can see what each other's up to and what's getting missed and why. So then we can make sure the next time round we can understand or help plan a little bit better. But also look at some things and go, well, that's just, you know what, that's not a critical need. We see that now, let's drop that, and everyone just relax. Don't try and overdo it, because you'll just put unnecessary pressure on yourself. So that might be another story for another time. Do yourself a favor. Have a look at leader standard work before you start running down the road of trying to learn every tool that there's been around. And I'd caution you just to make sure that you can structure your day well and have visibility with your other leaders around what you're here to do. So we're not just doing things right, we're doing the right things. So thanks very much for your time. I hope you've enjoyed this. Again, if you didn't, especially, I'd love your feedback either way, because it's about learning and you can teach me a lot of things as well. So I'm really looking forward to being with you all again as we move through season 3 of the Lean Solutions podcast. It's going to be a fantastic year. You're going to love Shane and Catherine, and of course, Patrick. He's a pro. He's very well seasoned in the podcast space, and has got a lot of listeners and a lot of people who enjoy tuning in. So hopefully I can add some value to that this year as we roll forward. So take care, everybody, and I'll talk to you next time. Cheers.
Hello, everyone. I am sorry to interrupt this episode of the Lean Solutions podcast, but I wanted to take a moment to invite you to pick up a copy of my Shingo award-winning book, Avoiding the Continuous Appearance Trap. In the book, I contrast the cultures of 2 companies I worked for. And though each started with similar lean models, one was mechanistic and only gave the appearance of lean, while the other developed a true culture of continuous improvement. The contrast provides a vivid example of the difference between fake lean and true lean. You can find the book on Amazon. Simply search my name or the title of the book. You aren't a reader? No worries. The audiobook is also available on Audible. Now, back to the show.
Hello everyone, my name is Catherine McDonald, and I'll be one of the 4 hosts for season 3 of the Lean Solutions podcast. I am very excited to contribute to this podcast and to learn from everyone else who's going to be involved. So I just want to give you a little bit of information about myself and my background before we get into the actual podcasts. Currently, I am a lean and leadership coach, and I have my own business called MCD Consulting, which I started in 2018. But before that, I spent 13 years working in the social care non-profit sector. My first job was as a social care worker before I moved into team leader roles and then project lead positions. And back then, this sector wasn't the easiest to work in. There was very little regulation, very little standards. And as you know, if you don't have those things, you don't have a great approach to improvement work because you have no foundation or guideline to work from. So as a result, I found myself in situations where there was a lot of firefighting, a lot of problems, a lot of reactive working. And I absolutely loved it, which might sound strange because it sounds so challenging, but I loved it because it taught me so much over the years, and it was a privilege to be involved in making things better, as I saw it. Not at the start, though. It was challenging at times because as a young manager in my 20s, I had no formal, let's say, managerial or leadership training. I was a typical Peter Principle case. I was promoted because I was good at what I did in a role. Then I was promoted into a role I was completely unprepared for. So I saw all this opportunity in my new role as a manager for improvement and change, which really excited me. But I didn't have the leadership skills or tools back then to inspire or guide the teams around me to see the things in the way that I saw them, which put me in a few sticky situations early on in my career. So I suppose in my early career, I did learn a lot about myself, and I did put a lot of work into my professional development. I went off and I did a master's in work and organizational behavior, which gave me huge insights into how organizations work, what makes them successful, what makes them fail, and also the huge impact that leadership has on just about everything. So it was during this course that I met people who introduced me to the concept of lean management, and immediately I loved it. And I thought, this is exactly what the nonprofit sector, what my organization needs. So I went off and I studied more, and I became a black belt in lean. And I did a few more courses along the way as well in leadership and executive coaching and such like. So followed my passions really in terms of what I saw as needed by the organization I was in at the time. And then I suppose over the years, I began to develop a vision for my own company, coaching company or consulting company. I wanted to really work with organizations, lots of different organizations, to make them great places to work through using a combination of lean and leadership development approaches. Because I suppose I really understood that people's feelings about their workplace, their work, their manager, their colleagues, their feelings about those things have a huge impact on their own individual creativity and productivity. And now that's still my mission, I suppose. I work with some great consulting companies in Ireland as a lean and leadership coach. And I worked with them for some time before I started out on my own. And I had some really great mentors along the way too, which I'm really thankful for. And now I balance my time between lean and leadership coaching, primarily in service sector and also with some nonprofit organizations. So in terms of what I do day to day, week to week, as a lean coach, I train teams in lean thinking and lean tools. And I facilitate and work directly with teams to help them communicate and collaborate, to problem solve and innovate, and to set up systems that enable them to be more proactive and organized in their approach to quality management and continuous improvement. And then as a leadership coach, on the other side of things, I provide training and one-to-one coaching for people who want to develop their leadership skills and leadership potential and help in this whole area of change management. So I do believe it's really important to combine lean and leadership development, because leaders and managers, they really need to have the social skills, the emotional skills, as well as the technical skills to be able to inspire and guide people to do things differently. And it's also a skill to know how to engage people and involve people fully in the change process. And that's a huge part of lean. So my job, much as I love it, it's not without its challenges, which on the positive side is great for my own professional development. Every organization I work with, every team, every person I coach present new challenges. So I do feel like I am continuously learning, and that obviously helps me to stay engaged in my job. But in terms of some of the challenges I faced, it might be helpful for me to maybe share an example with you. It might help other people in the same situation, because actually the example I can give you actually happens quite often in organizations. So I worked with a company who had so many problems that basically it was really difficult for them to know where to start with improvement. They were in constant, I would call it, firefighting mode. And while senior management really liked the idea of lean management, and they had called me in to discuss it and really wanted to get it up and running, it almost felt like another problem or another challenge to them, because they had so much on their plate already. So they really, really did not know how to start with lean. So my first few weeks in that company were spent at the Gemba, which, as lean practitioners will know, the place where work happens. So I spent time in the warehouses and as well as the offices, and I watched products come in and I watched them go out, and I talked to as many people as I could about systems and processes and problems, and also what was going well, because obviously that's important to hold on to that. So what I found was that every person I spoke to told me about a different problem. So I came out of those first few meetings with a long list of problems and little to no visibility on the extent of those problems or the impact of those problems, because there weren't a lot of measures for a lot of the problems I was hearing about. So, for example, one person told me about deliveries being abandoned at the back door for too long and food going off, or picking processes taking too long, or the amount of rework that was involved in orders because mistakes were made. But for so many of these little problems, seemingly little problems, there was no measure of them. So those long list of problems really weren't a whole lot of good to anybody. So what I did and how I started, we started through training and facilitation sessions, and we introduced the teams to DMAIC, D-M-A-I-C, which, as far as I know, is technically a Lean Six Sigma framework, more Six Sigma, I guess, originally. But it works really well, I find, when combined with Lean tools and techniques, especially when working with companies who are starting from scratch with Lean management. And if you don't know, DMAIC stands for define a problem, measure it, analyze it, improve it, and control it. So this particular organization had a habit of trying to improve situations without going through the first three stages of defining problems, measuring them, and analyzing them. And they were also rarely getting to the last stage, which is control, which is about maintaining the improvement. So they'd make an improvement and then that improvement would just drop off. So I know this is a common problem in so many organizations. So hopefully this will be a good example for a lot of people out there. So I set out to help them change their approach to improvement and quality management. And we started out small and local is the way I like to describe it. So I worked with a couple of departments to begin with, and I asked them to just start documenting their issues. Anything they had told me about, they could write it down, and anything else they hadn't told me about and that came up in the meantime, they were asked to just write it down and link it to whatever process it was related to. So this was a simple task. It didn't take much effort. And they did it. And then I worked with the managers to also change the weekly meeting agenda so that there was time in the meeting to talk through these issues, not to resolve them. That was really important. They weren't trying to resolve them. All they were trying to do as a team was to clarify the problems and to create a clear problem statement that concisely communicated the extent and the impact of the problem. And if they couldn't create this using the template I gave them, this signaled the need to gather data and go out and get a measure of the problem. So it was a fairly simple way to start. And what I found was that over the course of a few weeks, things started to change. So on my visits, I was now being presented with problem statements as opposed to problems, which made a huge difference because now we were at the stage where we could actually prioritize these problems, these huge long list of problems, and figure out where to start. So while it took a couple of months to get through the initial define and measure phase with the existing problems, it was really essential to get the foundation that we needed. So in the months following this, the teams were introduced to very simple prioritization tools and techniques because they had never used anything like this before. So I had to keep it really, really simple. So I stuck to just a couple of tools here and there. They were given a couple of tools and then went off and used them. So for example, like cost benefit analysis and effort impact charts, just to help them compare their problems and really focus in on their change efforts and what they needed to tackle. So by doing this, they were able to see some of the simpler changes that were not major projects that needed, let's say, huge analysis, but that could be made almost immediately to make processes even just a little bit more efficient. So, for example, they took a weekend to change their labeling in the warehouse. And what they did was they took off the tiny little labels that were really, really ineffective, showed nothing. And they put up new, bigger labels that clearly showed product name and code. And this was to reduce the problems with products being placed in the wrong row or wrong compartment, and then the wrong product being picked up and sent out on a customer order. So if a customer orders crinkle chips, they want crinkle chips. They don't want straight cut chips. But if the straight cut chips are in the crinkle chips department, then the person picking is going to pick up the straight cut chips and just put them in the basket and not going to check the name on the pack. That's what was happening over and over and over again. So customers kept sending back what was wrong and causing rework and headaches for staff and obviously affecting the reputation of the company as well. And those kinds of errors really just needed to be cut out. So a few simple changes like that they started making. So there were lots of small, just as we call them, just do it changes like that. But we know that, they're not going to solve or prevent all the problems. So I kept going with the teams following the DMAIC framework. And I also introduced them to PDSA. Some people call it PDCA, Plan, Do, Check Act. I prefer the term Plan, Do, Study Act. And that was to reinforce their understanding of the need to have systems in place to not just make a plan and take on actions and change things, but to constantly come back. It's that cycle of coming back, reviewing the actions and the impact and the progress of everything that was happening. So that was really, really important that they understood that was a huge part of Lean as well. So when we got to the analyze stage, I could see people getting a bit more excited about the whole thing. It was less of a chore because they felt that the process mapping exercises, because they were really interactive, people felt like they were involved, contributing, learning. They felt their opinions were valuable, and they liked being part of cross-departmental teams and seeing processes laid out, understanding their own role better and understanding the roles of other people a bit better as well. So they really liked that whole part of the process. And of course, there's times, and there were lots of times where teams got stuck, and there was, I would call it, a healthy sprinkling of conflict at times, but that's where coaching and facilitation skills were really important, both mine as the external coach and also those of the internal managers. So I did provide some one-to-one leadership coaching to help the managers develop the skills that they needed to be able to manage what was happening, manage the change, manage the conflict, all the relationships, and even just time and energy and everything else that was happening in the organization. So that's an example of, I suppose, how it can be beneficial to adopt a simple framework, just one simple framework, and link very simple lean tools to that framework. And most importantly, combine lean with leadership development and ensure that there are leaders, effective leaders, to put systems in place for this all to work and to support people to take ownership of what's happening in the change process and to actually be able to change their own habits and behaviors and start doing things differently. So hopefully that gives you an indication of who I am and what I do as a lean and leadership coach. And final words, I'm really looking forward to a great season and to meeting all of our guests, and make sure everyone to look out for the official launch on January 29th, 2024, and I will see you all then.
Thanks so much for tuning in to this episode of the Lean Solutions Podcast. If you haven't done so already, please be sure to subscribe. This way you'll get updates as new episodes become available. If you feel so inclined, please give us a review. Thank you so much.